On July 10th, 1856, during one of the most violent lightning storms in recorded history, a child was born who would literally capture lightning and give it to humanity. But here's what they don't tell you about Nikola Tesla. The man who invented our modern electrical world was so obsessed with the number 3 that he walked around buildings 3 times before entering. He calculated the cubic volume of every piece of food before eating. He fell in love with a pigeon. For over a century, we've focused on Tesla's inventions while ignoring the most fascinating mystery of all, his mind. Today, we're going to decode the psychological profile of history's most enigmatic genius. And what we discover will change how you think about creativity, obsession, and the price of brilliance forever. I'm diving deep into psychological research, biographical evidence, and modern neuroscience to reveal the hidden patterns that drove Tesla's innovations. If you're fascinated by the intersection of psychology and genius, you're going to love this channel. Hit that subscribe button and let's unlock the secrets of extraordinary minds together. We'll explore Tesla's childhood trauma that shaped his entire worldview, decode his extreme personality through the Big Five model, examine his obsessive behaviors through a modern psychological lens, uncover the hidden motivations behind his isolation, and discover what his story teaches us about channeling our own psychological quirks into creative power. Most people see Tesla as the eccentric inventor, the mad scientist with wild hair shooting electricity through his body. But this public image masks a psychological reality far more complex and honestly, far more human than you might expect. While the world saw a confident showman, Tesla was actually living with crippling social anxiety. He could command a room full of investors, but he couldn't maintain a single intimate relationship. He understood human nature well enough to invent technologies that connected the world, yet he died alone, talking to pigeons. Now, this wasn't just introversion. This was a man whose psychological defenses were so elaborate that he transformed his deepest vulnerabilities into his greatest strengths. His obsession with cleanliness wasn't vanity, it was an anxiety response. His rigid routines weren't eccentricity, they were survival mechanisms. Every morning, Tesla would wake up at precisely the same time, polish his shoes until they reflected like mirrors, calculate the cubic volume of his breakfast, and count his steps in multiples of 3. To most people, this looks like madness. To a psychologist, this looks like someone who discovered that extreme structure could unleash unlimited creativity. The first major revelation: Tesla's public persona was essentially an elaborate performance designed to hide a nervous system so sensitive that normal human interaction was literally overwhelming. But instead of letting this sensitivity destroy him, he weaponized it. To understand Tesla's adult psychology, we have to go back to a lightning storm in 1856. Tesla was born during what locals called the Devil's Storm, but his midwife predicted he would be a child of light. This symbolic beginning was just the start of a childhood that would forge one of history's most complex minds. Tesla's mother, Georgina, was an inventor herself. Despite being illiterate, she created ingenious household devices and had a photographic memory. She encouraged Tesla's intellectual curiosity but showed affection, primarily when he demonstrated cleverness. This created what psychologists call conditional love. Tesla learned early that he was valued for his mind, not simply for existing. But the most formative event happened when Tesla was just 5 years old. His older brother Daniel, described as more handsome, more charming, more naturally gifted, died in a horse riding accident. Tesla later said he felt like he was living in Daniel's shadow for the rest of his life. Think about the psychological impact. A 5-year-old loses his perfect brother and spends his childhood feeling like a replacement. His parents' grief was palpable. Tesla became convinced that his parents wished Daniel had survived instead of him. This created what psychologists recognize as survivor guilt, combined with an impossible psychological mission. He had to achieve enough to justify his existence. From an attachment theory perspective, Tesla developed what we call an anxious avoidant pattern. He desperately wanted approval and connection, but he'd learned that emotional intimacy was dangerous. People you love can disappear without warning. So he kept everyone at a distance while obsessively working to prove his worth. This childhood template played out in every relationship Tesla ever had. He would charm people when he needed something funding, support, recognition. But the moment they wanted genuine intimacy or partnership, he would withdraw. His most honest relationships were with pigeons because they couldn't abandon him the way humans could. Now let's decode Tesla's personality using the Big Five model, the most scientifically validated way to understand human psychology. And Tesla's profile is absolutely extraordinary. First, openness to experience. Tesla scored off the charts, probably in the 95th percentile. But this wasn't just curiosity, this was a mind that could visualize complex three-dimensional machinery and run mental experiments with perfect accuracy. Tesla claimed he could build, test, and refine entire inventions in his mind before ever touching physical materials. But extreme openness comes with costs. Tesla was overwhelmed by sensory input. He couldn't stand the texture of pearls, was hypersensitive to light and sound, and found most environments chaotically overstimulating. His brain was constantly processing patterns and possibilities that others couldn't even perceive. Conscientiousness. Tesla was in the 98th percentile. His daily routines were so rigid they bordered on ritual. 18 napkins at every meal, exactly 10 blocks of walking each evening. Food volumes calculated to the cubic inch. This wasn't obsessive-compulsive disorder in the clinical sense. This was someone who discovered that extreme structure was the only way to manage extreme creativity. Think about it. If your mind is constantly flooded with new ideas and possibilities, you need something to anchor you. Tesla's routines provided cognitive scaffolding that freed up mental resources for innovation. While others spent mental energy deciding what to eat or how to organize their day, Tesla had automated these decisions, leaving more brainpower for invention. Extroversion. Tesla was in the 5th percentile, meaning 95% of people are more socially oriented than he was. But this wasn't shyness. This was fundamental orientation toward internal processing. Tesla's most productive hours were spent alone, running mental experiments and developing concepts that would later revolutionize the world. His deepest relationship was with a white pigeon he fed daily in New York's parks. Tesla said he loved this pigeon as a man loves a woman. To most people, this seems pathological, but from a psychological perspective, Tesla had found a way to experience love without the vulnerability that human relationships demanded. Agreeableness, moderate to low. Tesla could be charming when necessary, but he was fundamentally skeptical of others' ideas and dismissive of conventional thinking. This disagreeableness was essential to his innovation. It allowed him to reject established paradigms and pursue impossible-seeming concepts. And neuroticism, high. Tesla lived with constant anxiety, obsessive thoughts, and sensitivity to stress. But here's the fascinating part. This same neuroticism drove his perfectionism and attention to detail. His anxiety wasn't a bug in his psychological system. It was a feature that enabled unprecedented precision in his work. Now let's examine the recurring behavioral patterns that reveal Tesla's deepest psychological motivations. And what we find is a man driven by forces he barely understood himself. Tesla's famous celibacy wasn't just a practical choice to avoid distraction. He stated that a man has not the right to deprive the world of a good invention for the sake of a woman. But psychologically, this reveals someone who had convinced himself that love and creativity were mutually exclusive, probably because early trauma had taught him that emotional intimacy led to devastating loss. His relationship with money and recognition was equally complex. Tesla constantly sought public validation. He loved dramatic demonstrations and media attention, but he consistently made business decisions that left him impoverished. He sold his AC patents to Westinghouse for a fraction of their value and died nearly penniless despite inventing technologies worth billions. From a psychological perspective, this looks like self-sabotage rooted in survivor guilt. Tesla felt he didn't deserve success more than his deceased brother would have. So he would achieve recognition, then unconsciously destroy his position, creating a cycle of triumph and defeat that played out throughout his entire career. Tesla's behavioral patterns reveal three core fears that drove almost every decision: fear of contamination, fear of dependency, and fear of emotional intimacy. His germophobia wasn't just about bacteria, it was about maintaining control in a world that felt fundamentally unsafe. His financial independence obsession wasn't about money, it was about never being vulnerable to others' decisions again. His coping mechanisms were sophisticated but ultimately limiting. Intellectualization, he turned emotional experiences into abstract concepts. Sublimation, he channeled all life energy into work. Isolation, he maintained distance to protect his sensitive nervous system. These strategies enabled his innovations but prevented genuine human connection. In his later years, Tesla's psychological defenses began breaking down. He claimed to receive signals from Mars, became obsessed with death rays, and grew increasingly paranoid about others stealing his ideas. But given Tesla's track record of impossible inventions becoming reality, it's hard to know where advanced thinking ended and delusion began. So what can Tesla's psychological profile teach us about creativity, innovation, and managing our own minds? The lessons are both inspiring and cautionary. First lesson: structure enables creativity, not restricts it. Tesla's rigid routines weren't obstacles to innovation. They were the foundation that made innovation possible. If you're a creative person struggling with chaos, consider that extreme structure might actually free your mind for more important work. Second, psychological sensitivities can become superpowers when properly channeled. Tesla's anxiety drove his precision. His obsessive thinking enabled mental modeling that others couldn't achieve. His social isolation protected his sensitive nervous system from overwhelming input. The key is learning to work with your psychology, not against it. But here's the cautionary part: complete social isolation ultimately becomes self-defeating. Tesla's avoidance of human connection protected him from emotional pain, but also cut him off from emotional sustenance. His greatest achievements came from understanding human needs, yet he never allowed himself to experience basic human relationships. Modern research suggests that optimal creativity requires what psychologists call productive solitude, periods of intense focus combined with meaningful social connection. Tesla had the solitude part mastered, but never figured out the connection piece. Final lesson: Tesla's sense of mission, bringing electricity to humanity, sustained him through decades of setbacks and criticism. Having a purpose larger than personal comfort or conventional success can provide motivation that transcends individual psychological limitations. Tesla's psychological profile reveals one of history's most fascinating paradoxes. A man so sensitive to human nature that he revolutionized how humans connect, yet so protective of his own sensitivity that he never allowed himself genuine human connection. We've seen how childhood trauma shaped his attachment patterns, how extreme personality traits enabled unprecedented innovation, how sophisticated defense mechanisms both protected and limited him, and how his psychological quirks became the foundation for world-changing inventions. Tesla's story reminds us that genius isn't just about intelligence. It's about the complex interaction between cognitive abilities, personality traits, early experiences, and psychological coping mechanisms. Understanding these patterns can help us recognize and nurture our own potential while avoiding Tesla's tragic isolation. If you found Tesla's psychological profile fascinating, you'll love my analysis of Einstein's social anxiety and how it fueled his breakthrough thinking, or my deep dive into Leonardo da Vinci's ADHD and how it enabled his Renaissance innovations. What aspects of Tesla's psychology resonate most with your own creative process? Are you more like Tesla, needing extreme structure to channel creativity, or do you thrive in chaos? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to understand the hidden psychology behind history's greatest minds, subscribe and hit the notification bell. I'm constantly researching and analyzing the mental patterns that drive extraordinary achievement. Your next breakthrough might be just one psychological insight away. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into Tesla's mind. Until next time, remember, understanding psychology isn't just about analyzing others. It's about unlocking the extraordinary potential that already exists within yourself.